Hi everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations and your assignment today. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at Mercury Retrograde. And this is for the 30th of May until the 22nd of June 2021. This is when Mercury will actually be in a retrograde formation. And of course, there are two shadow periods that will precede the 30th and will obviously be after the 22nd. These are about a week and a half afterwards, okay? So it does affect us for a little bit longer than the dates that I've put there. Now, in this video, what I want to put across is how Mercury retrograde influences the deeper message that I feel is emerging with the lunar eclipse, with the solar eclipse, that pattern that's changing, the Saturn retrograde, and the Jupiter retrograde. And you'll see that there's a playlist where we have put videos of these different shifts. So the Saturn retrograde is there. You'll see the lunar eclipse video as well as the eclipse portal overview video. And we will be adding this video as well as the Jupiter retrograde and solar eclipse video there as well. So that's part of a playlist and you'll see it. I'll link it in the comment section below. And what we're putting across is, what is the overall theme that is taking place here? And the way that we see it is this is an opportunity with these planetary energies to provoke deep thought and exploration around certain belief systems or ideas or ways of seeing reality that have shaped you, essentially. So in the past, we would have been raised in a certain way, and society would have had certain cultural value structures, certain things that were taboo, which were okay and which were not. And of course, you had your parents imprinting on you as well. So these planetary archetypes, to me, represent the process of peeling away beliefs and ideas and perspectives that you have about yourself and about life, and essentially that are limiting. And it's to question them and to objectify them and say, is that really true? Is this internalized negative statement about myself really true? Or is it exactly what it is, just an internalized negative statement that belongs to the other person's opinion, right? So this overarching energy is essentially triggering the potential to deeply awaken our truth, our true nature, and to let that eruption of self-realization burn away false ideas and false truths that we carry about ourselves and about life as well. And I covered that in great detail with the Saturn retrograde, as well as the lunar eclipse and the overview as well. So with Mercury retrograde, what I want to focus on is a few things that I've mentioned in previous videos that I feel could be supportive, and we'll also dive into the chart as well to see specific aspects that I think could be important to pay attention to. Okay. Now, I've got my little notes over here, and the last time that Mercury was retrograde was the 30th of January to the 21st of February 2021, and that was in Aquarius. And I think that that's really significant, and here's why. When Mercury goes retrograde, what we will then be processing is all of the information that we've been exposing ourselves to and gathering since the previous time that it was retrograde. So now that we have Mercury retrograde here in Gemini, starting on the 30th of May, we're going to be processing what essentially took place between the January the 30th to February the 21st, that retrograde period. We're going to be processing what occurred between these two retrograde periods, okay? And it makes sense, right? It makes sense that we would be reflecting on what we have gathered. And here's why. Mercury, from evolutionary astrology's point of view, looks at the way in which we label the phenomena of reality, okay? In other words, the words and the labels we give to objects, as well as the way that we structure language, very left brain orientated function, is associated with Mercury, associated with Gemini. So I'm communicating to you right now. I'm using a language structure that is associated with evolutionary astrology or astrology per se. And because you have exposed yourself to astrology and astrology language, most of what I'm sharing and speaking about, you find resonance with, in the sense that you go, oh, yeah, that's Mercury. I know what Mercury means. And you will always be interfacing your interpretation of Mercury and what you've gathered versus my interpretation, what I've gathered. And as we communicate together, we kind of find, we fine tune our interpretation. So Mercury is our way in which we structure our language, how we process our information. And again, it's about how we label things so we can connect. Okay, very left brain oriented process. And primarily it's a gathering function. It's gathering information. Okay, so when Mercury goes retrograde, we are processing what we have gathered over the past 4 months. And this is a feature or a function, should I say, that is done through the intuitive right brain. Okay, so in a previous video, somebody made a comment asking, is this just my own observations, or how does this correlate to medical astrology? Why is it associated with the right brain? And the reason why EA associates Mercury retrograde as a feature of pointing towards Jupiter. So when Mercury is retrograde, we look at Jupiter, the intuitive brain, the right brain. It's because when Mercury goes retrograde, it goes offline, right? So our gathering function, our wanting to consume information, right, turns off, and we turn inward. And what happens is all of the information that we've been gathering for just over 4 months, it doesn't just stay in one place. It doesn't just kind of like, it's not on the forefront of your awareness over the last 3 months. Like if I said to you, what did you do 6 Tuesdays ago, right? And label it. You wouldn't be able to do it, right? You'd be able to have some fragments. So the information that we gather gets dumped into the Uranian field. Now I've introduced Uranus here, I've introduced Jupiter here, and I'm talking about Mercury. So I can see how this can be a bit confusing. But what we're doing here is we're going that Uranus is the feature of long-term memory. Okay, so everything that we gather Mercury, after a while gets put into the long-term memory. And then we have an event or a circumstance or a situation that may trigger trigger a smell or trigger a conversation, and then we recall from the long-term memory into our awareness. And Mercury is kind of like fetching the information from the storage house, right? And it brings it to the surface, and then we communicate through memory. It's the right brain or intuitive function that allows us to connect to the story. So when Mercury goes offline, what we're looking at here is we're looking now at the Jupiter function, in which everything is stored through memory, through the abstract, right? Through the way that we remember the experience. That's one thing. The second thing is when Mercury goes retrograde and we look at the right brain, what we're looking at here is our intuitive understanding of something. So here's the best way to describe this, right? Or at least I think. Let's say you're studying for an exam, okay? And you're reading, you're taking in all the information through the textbooks, through your notes, and you're learning Mercury, right? You're gathering. And then what they would say, people that done research, they would say, now go and take a break, right? Go take like an hour or two, go take a break and let the information settle. When the information's settling, at some point we start to have these moments of clarity, of intuitive understanding. So we have information and then we have intuitive understanding. So when Mercury goes retrograde, we've been processing all this information, and as we're reflecting and reviewing, we have moments of aha. We have moments of, oh, okay, now I understand what that's about, or now I get clarity on that. So we have this very intuitive process that comes to us, and we get clarity on information. We understand it in our own way. And that's why Mercury retrograde also, or any planets for that matter, when they are retrograde, they speak to the individuation process. of a planet. So we are stripping away information that was not necessary. We are reflecting on what information has meaning to us. And we develop a intuitive understanding of the information that we've gathered over the last 3 months. Okay? So when we have Mercury retrograde experiences, what is essentially occurring is for the time it's retrograde, we're in a deeply reflective process and we have spontaneous moments of aha. And that comes through the right brain's function of, it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like an abstract way in which information just synthesizes itself together. And we have that moment of, oh, okay, now I understand why I gathered that, or now I understand why that moment is there, or yeah, 3 weeks ago I was learning that, but now I get it, right? So we have this deep processing that then leads to aha moments, okay? And then we take that information as Mercury then moves forward, and it becomes a layering of our philosophical or our philosophical way of looking at life, for one way of saying it, but maybe let's take a little bit more tangible. The way in which we perceive reality, these insights become sort of integrated into our worldview. So when Mercury goes direct, we will then be gathering new information, but this information that we've been processing relative to the previous 3 months, right? I hope everybody's following, right? The relative to the previous 3 months, that information starts to become a little bit more part of your worldview. And so you'll start to notice yourself directing your reality or perceiving things in alignment with what it is that you have recently discovered about your life or information that's come through to you. And this will always be related to events and circumstances that are happening in your life anyway. Yeah. So that's the Mercury retrograde and why it's associated with the right brain. Now, if we look at the chart and we go, okay, Mercury's in Gemini right now, and it was in Aquarius in its previous retrograde, we're essentially processing Mercury's movement all the way from Aquarius all the way to Gemini. So we're looking at Aries, we're looking at Pisces, we're looking at Taurus. Those are the 3 signs essentially that Mercury was going through before it turned retrograde. It was in Gemini as well. And so we're looking at those 3 signs and we're looking at the significance of them. Now, if you have a lot of time on your hands and you want to go and research that, I mean, you could probably get a lot of information from that. But I would say that essentially just use this time to reflect on significant events that have taken place in your life over the last 3 months and allow those reflective states to just be present with you. And I can go as far as to say, if you have a pen and some paper, write down the way that you felt about them, write how you perceived them. And then ask yourself the question, what beliefs do I hold about that experience that is healthy for me or not, or liberating for me or not? Right? You just want to allow yourself to express, right? Again, when we talk about Gemini in this context, we're also talking about the ability for us to express. It's a function that's associated with the Leo archetype, right? So we're expressing. So take this opportunity to reflect back on the last 3 months and look at scenarios or circumstances that you've had, peak experiences, and just sort of dialogue, with somebody, or take a pen and paper and write it down. And if you are doing that with somebody, ask them to just pay attention to certain ways in which you express something, and ask them to reflect back to you, is that true? And then sort of sit with it, right? You'd actually be surprised at how much profound insight you will be able to get when doing those types of exercises, because you're beginning to see the more deeper subconscious ways in which the information influences your perception, and how that is part of your beliefs and your ideas about things. And it gives you an opportunity to really become conscious of it. And it's a way to actually experience directly for yourself the function of the right brain, abstract, nonlinear time, space, reality emerge to the surface. And it shows you what certain beliefs you hold. Okay. All right, cool. So I know that's a lot of information. And what we're going to do now is we're going to jump onto the chart, and I'm going to share with you some of the aspects and hopefully give some more context to how we can use Mercury retrograde to empower ourselves. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so here we have the 29th of May, 2021. And as you can see, Mercury is in its stationary form, right? Now, of course, on recording this video, it's not the 29th anymore. So Mercury is already in its retrograde form. And I just wanted to point out that when a planet moves into a stationary position, it has tension on it. Okay, so there's two points. There's the Mercury retrograde, or the stationary point retrograde, and the stationary point direct, SR and SD. So the SR, or stationary retrograde, which is what Mercury is on the 29th of May, this has got a lot of tension in it. It's like lots of tension. And then when it turns retrograde, that tension, like an elastic band, gets released. And then you experience an entire retrograde process where information is being processed throughout the time. And then eventually we will hit the point in which Mercury will then go direct. So we'll have a stationary direct just before it's about to move forward. And it won't actually have tension on it anymore. It will have a lot of clarity. We'll have like clarity, and we're like, aha, this is how I'm going to move forward. Okay. And that's essentially what happens with all planets when they move stationary direct. There's this kind of tension on it first. And then as you get to the more forward moving energy, it's lots of clarity. So if you have got a planet, you've got a planet in your chart that's retrograde, go check out if it just turned retrograde or if it just turned direct, because your experience of that retrograde will be completely different. Okay. All right. So the first things first, if we look over here, we've got a Venus-Mercury conjunction there, and that is squaring Neptune. So that's very significant. Okay. And the reason why I say that is because firstly, you can see there's a lot of activity in Gemini. Okay. So we're talking about the focus of the Gemini energy. Okay. We're focusing on Gemini here. Just remember, we've already had a lunar eclipse. Okay. So the moon was here when we had the lunar eclipse, and the focus was primarily on Jupiter as the kind of the pointer. And we talked about the need to look at our subconscious beliefs that we hold about life, and we want to question if they are true and relevant in our lives right now. Okay, so that was the lunar eclipse message. Now that we have the Mercury retrograde, Mercury turns in and it says, okay, well, let's now begin to reflect on this. Here's the energy to support this reflective process. And again, it goes retrograde. So we're focusing on the right brain, right? We're focusing on the intuitive side. So there immediately you can see the synchronicity between Mercury turning retrograde in Gemini and Jupiter being involved. So we're questioning and we're looking at the narrative, right? Certain ideas and certain beliefs you hold about your life, about yourself, are they rooted in deeper clarity? Are they true for you right now? Or are they still beliefs that you hold about yourself that are no longer relevant or real? Essentially, are they adopted from cultural conditioning, parental conditioning, other people's value systems that you have internalized as yourself, and then you run the script according to that belief as opposed to your own value system. Okay, so that's what that Saturn retrograde is about as well. And Mercury is conjunct the Venus. So like I said, we're now dealing with our inner relationship to ourselves and how we have internalized that inner relationship to ourselves. And how does that inner relationship then become projected onto people? How does that inner relationship that we have to ourselves become projected onto other people? So a classic kind of Jung process, what is it about the other person that mirrors something in me? So you might find yourself through this Mercury retrograde asking yourself, another person's behavior, why does it upset me? What is it in me that I can look at and shift a narrative? And so one of the narratives that could shift in yourself is if you're in a relationship and you tend to have a certain type of relationship always attracted to you, ask yourself the question, what subconscious belief do I hold about myself that attracts these types of relationships? Is it that I am showing people that my boundaries are too porous, right, or very open, and it invites people to XYZ? That's one example. You might have a certain idea about something, and you may, if you explore the deep origins as to why that idea or that belief you hold is rooted in a negative experience, you may want to ask yourself: is this truth or this perception being shaped by a deeper subconscious belief that I had to internalize when I was a child, and now it is running my life? Great example could be you may have had a lot of responsibility placed on you when you were growing up. And one of the beliefs that you had to subconsciously adopt in order to survive was, I need to be responsible for everybody. Right. And so therefore you find yourself in a kind of savior role. And you want to ask yourself the question, is that really an authentic expression of wanting to help? Or is it coming from a deeper subconscious need or a belief that if because nobody was around to support, I needed to be that. And so now, therefore, I project that into my now reality. Okay. So this Venus Mercury here says, let's relook at the internal relationship we have to ourselves. Now, again, Uranus is being influenced by Venus. Venus is the planet that is associated with Taurus. So now what you have here, and I'll show you the astrology of my sentences, the Uranus archetype in Taurus is conditioning and speaking to the Venus. So that's where I get the liberation from. That's where I get the, hey, this is about changing the pattern. All right. And what is it changing? It's changing the inner relationship, Taurus, and what script we have, what narrative we use within ourselves. Okay. And then if you look, Uranus is squaring Saturn in Aquarius. So Uranus is the planet associated with Aquarius. Aquarius is conditioning, or Uranus is conditioning Saturn. So here we have another repeating theme of liberation. So the theme of liberation is the core understructure here. And what are we liberating from? Right? We're liberating from those messages. See it? Now, the square that's been had with Mercury, Venus, Neptune, which is what I started off with, that square is the tension, the dynamic tension between, going deep into your own subconscious stratosphere, which again, it's subconscious, so it's invisible in a way that it's not like on your face. You're having to really feel into those experiences. That sensitivity that Neptune provides gives us that opportunity. It allows us to heal from those parts of ourselves that are essentially separated within us. So what I talk about separation, what I mean is we have ideas where a negative experience or an experience that was intense for us, we tend to separate ourselves as a protection mechanism from that experience. And then we form a belief or an idea around that separation that then essentially runs our lives. So these energies present the potential importance. These energies present the potential to heal Neptune from experiences and circumstances and situations that we've had in our lives where separation is taking place. And Neptune is associated with separation because it's either oneness or it is the perceived separation that we have. Okay, it's really deep to explain, and I don't want to take up too much time in terms of trying to explain that. So at some points, I'll get an opportunity to talk about Neptune in the sense of how does it correlate to separation. But we are essentially, when we separate from the womb, the ritual of cutting the umbilical cord creates that moment, that peak moment of separating from oneness. But we are essentially not separated completely. It's just our physical body represents the individual journey. So Neptune healing is the return to wholeness, and the return to wholeness is the function in which we come to experience closure within ourselves, where we have beliefs that are essentially rooted in separateness. Okay, so that square that's there is a dynamic tension between breaking away from ideas and perspectives and things that are no longer real for us anymore, Neptune, no longer real for us, and healing them in the same process. And it does require us to have compassion and empathy towards ourselves and the experience, and that's deeply supported by Mars trining Neptune. Although Mars is in opposition to Pluto during this Mercury retrograde experience, so expect there to be events of intense emotion coming to the surface. Okay. So if we move on to the planetary aspects, Mercury conjunct Venus, again, we're looking at re-establishing and understanding our value and our self-worth. That's also a big key that comes along with this. And I talked about this before in terms of Pluto quincunxing Venus here, right? Mercury would also be quincunxing. There's that line, that aspect. Can you see it there, that green one? They are blind spots. So you don't see the definition or the internalized crystal thought that you have. Internalized crystal thought, Capricorn, Pluto and Capricorn is exposing old, outdated, crystallized thought patterns, Mercury, Venus, Gemini. Yeah. So there's no like clear indication that when these sudden eruptions of emotions come to the surface, or sensitivities, right, around the way that we communicate or feel towards the way that we are communicated towards, or how we have internalized a message, right? Those, when we have these peak experiences, there's no clear indicator that that's what's happening to you. So that's why I'm saying that the message here is that when these eruptions take place, ask yourself the question, when you've allowed yourself to settle, what limiting beliefs am I removing from myself? Where can I see the opportunity to free from certain ideas that I carry and still hold about my life? And then you just dialogue about that. Okay. All right. So we're going to look at Mercury square Neptune. We've been talking about that. Mercury square Neptune is a transit that can feel incredibly empowering, especially when you're dialoguing, communicating, allowing your unconscious to come to the surface through symbolism, through dialogue, through free association writing. This would be a really great idea. Mercury will stay in orb with Neptune up until the 9th of June. So it's quite a long time. It's a very powerful place. But also be mindful of deceptiveness, okay? Deception. That's also something, yeah, it's like, is it true or not with other people? Okay, so, you know, there's not much. I mean, Venus goes into Cancer after this. Again, this is not so much about Venus here, but Mercury retrograde. And you'll see the Sun and the North Node conjunct and form and pass each other, you know, from the 30th onwards. So there's a lot of significance on that North Node. It's just consistently pointing to the Mercury feature. And I feel like I've really driven home the point here quite a lot in this chart. You know, lots of trines consistently happening with Saturn, as you can see there. You know, the quincunx now with Pluto is gone. So, you know, the intensity of those sudden emotional shifts will have already occurred. And the energy just kind of keeps on going, right? We just keep moving along. Nothing spectacular, at least from my point of view, that's taking place. The patterns are still in place. There are lots of trines, again, to support and facilitate this evolutionary dynamic. And we keep going. Again, there's lots of trines, nothing too significant. We'll have, of course, a new moon take place, right? This is, if we have a look over here, the 10th and 11th of June, right? If we look between the 10th and 11th of June, there's a new moon that takes place there in Gemini. So I would say the 10th and 11th of June are peak experiences that are associated with the new moon. So my intuitive mind brings me to a sense that this new moon will definitely provide, I mean, it's a solar eclipse, right? So it will provide a profound awakening around information that will open up your mind to seeing beyond what you have seen. So this is also about really expanding and stretching our philosophy of life and asking ourselves, where do we have these beliefs that stop us from seeing beyond? So new horizons is the word I would use for this solar eclipse. And it's significant, and we'll do a video on this, because it does. It gives us the opportunity to see beyond what we know. Okay. So that's, of course, a big day. And then, of course, we talked about this as well with Saturn. Saturn is there, and it's going to be squaring Uranus at exactly the same time. So 14th, 13th of June will correspond with deep liberation. So this is a very, very big phase. I think that the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th of June are going to be really, really powerful days for us. And this is a great time to take a pen and or a voice note, whatever it is, and really get down your thoughts, because you're going to see a tremendous amount of awareness come out of it. Okay. Mercury just still there, closing up to the North Node. Sun enters Cancer, and then we have another stationary retrograde. So on the 22nd of June, Mercury will now station. It will be 6 degrees off the North Node, so it won't actually be on the North Node, but it's very, very close there as well. And again, I mean, look at the trines. There's just tons of trines. Yeah, Jupiter and the Moon square, but that's very, very small. But Mercury is well aspected. So to me, I think that this is a really profound explosion of really a lot of information. So one thing I would say is this is also a time to get clear on what distracts you. Okay, what is distracting you, right? So this is something that I've now realized through doing this with you guys, that this Mercury retrograde also asks you to look at what's distracting you. Where are you wasting your time and energy in something that's just a momentary, this is cool, versus what's actually deeply impacting your life? So that's another thing to check in with during this Mercury retrograde, is asking yourself the question, where am I putting my time and attention in ways that are not necessarily bringing me anything meaningful? So I'll leave it with that. Okay. Awesome, guys. Well, I really hope that you found a lot of value in what I've been sharing with you today. And what I would say is, if you could take just a moment to maybe write in the comments below what about this video did you find helpful? I'm always super curious to hear, what were the experiences that you had that brought you into contact with this video that had meaning to you. So if you have a moment, I'd really like it if you could let me know something that struck you as important, where you had a aha moment, where you felt you had some clarity, anything that you consider to be valuable. I'd really appreciate that, so that I can kind of really get to see what is important for you guys. And I'm going to try and tune into how to deliver these videos in a way that really kind of speaks to you, and this time that you're spending with me on this call is also valuable, as opposed to just kind of watching another video on YouTube. Okay, so I really want to sort of reinforce the idea that our time is very precious to ourselves, and I want to kind of meet that and honor that as well. So yeah, all right. Okay, everybody, have an amazing day. Don't forget to check out the playlist as well if you want to watch other videos, if this is the first time you're watching this video and you haven't seen the others. And yeah, have an amazing day. Bye-bye.